Hello, everybody, and welcome to our webinar, Is Procurement Slowing Your Business Down? Procurement teams we know are under pressure to maintain control, visibility, and governance. But at the same time, they're supposed to be enabling the business to move quickly. In reality, spend happens across multiple teams, creating friction, slowing execution, and making it harder to stay in control. I'm Rory Chowdhury, Head of Product Marketing at Soldo, and I'm delighted to welcome two people as our speakers today. So we're going to have a conversation. We have on the one side procurement expert Tom Mills, and on the other side Soldo's CMO marketing expert Isabel Duarte. And they're going to explore this particular challenge from both sides. Tom, of course, brings the perspective of modern procurement leaders who are managing decentralized spend, while Isabel shares the realities that business teams face when speed and execution are critical. Together, they're going to unpack where and why misalignment happens, from measurement and incentives through to processes, and what needs to change to reduce friction without losing control. In a moment, I'm going to bring them onto the stage. But before we get started, I'd love if you would interact with us and just answer the poll that we're going to go live with in about a second. Here we go. Right, some of you have already voted. That's excellent. I'd encourage everyone to vote. We've got a large number of people on here. And while that's happening, let's bring Isabel and Tom onto the stage as well.
Hey everyone,
Hello.
good afternoon. All right. Rory, you're on mute, I believe.
Yeah.
I am on mute. Right, let me hand over to you. Let's start with budget allocation. Often late in the quarter, but you still got to spend it in the quarter, and compliance is critical. I think in general, Isabel, you've always said that marketing knows they aren't procurement's number one priority. And Tom, you've certainly said to me that marketing are procurement's biggest challenge. Take it away.
Do you want to go first, Tom?
Yeah, I will do. So when I say marketing are the procurement's biggest challenge, there's all sorts of reasons for that. And I just want to say, Isabel, this is not personal. So, but I'm really interested in the conversation. The reason it is because procurement tend to be targeted on very traditional finance-led metrics, which, to be really honest, just don't align with the way a typical marketing team works. So maybe I'm experienced enough and mature enough to have witnessed that, to have seen how that plays out. But I'd be loved to know your perspective, Isabel.
Yes. Oh, my perspective. Where do I start? I think I need to start, oddly enough, at the beginning. I think one of the things that people always underestimate is the context that brings the tension, right? Now, here's a few of the realities that never move for marketing. First of all, a budget always arrives late, right? So the reality for most marketeers is you start the quarter, you haven't even got your budget yet. I mean, I have personally known being 2 weeks in the quarter and still haven't got my budget. So the start of the quarter is super tense for marketing. Oh, and by the way, when did you get your budget? You almost never get what you thought you were going to get, right? And so what happens is that every single quarter, it doesn't matter how well you've planned, you start with a replan. So it's a perfect pressure cooker thing. And Tom, I'm really sorry for what I'm about to do, but this is when I would normally hear from procurement phrases like, well, you should have planned better. Right?
Yeah, and sorry, you carry on, Isabel. I feel like I'm desperate to defend ourselves there, but you carry on if I've got you.
So, which is sort of fair, but really unfair at the same time. I can actually see it from your perspective, because what we do is we flood procurement, and by the way, legal teams as well, with dozens and dozens and dozens of requests right as the quarter starts. And so it's pressure cooker, and everything is urgent, by the way. We know that everything is urgent because we have to spend in the quarter, right? Because one of the other sentences we hear all the time is use it or lose it, right? If it's not used compliantly this quarter, you're done. So there is an absolute pressure cooker environment to how we work, especially at the start of the quarter. And that doesn't help us. And I don't think it helps you either. I'm going to pause here because I feel like you've got a right to answer.
Yeah, no. And by the way, I hear and I've heard that phrase in terms of you should have planned better. I can actually, honestly, hear myself thinking it a few years ago. So I accept the challenge. There is a real challenge of alignment here, because typically a well-run procurement process, if it's an RFP or you're going out to select the best supplier, doesn't, it takes 10 to 12 weeks. So that is the duration of an entire quarter. So let's face it, there is automatically a misalignment between the way procurement is set up to work and the way marketing teams set up to work. And what we need to do more, and what we're not doing enough of, is actually sitting down and having that honest conversation. And that's why I think we need to be having this dialogue. That's why I'm so pleased we've got this webinar set up today.
Yeah, I concur entirely, because I often think about every single business relationship is about finding the right compromise, right? You don't want a zero-sum game between us, right?
Yeah.
Can be a loser or a winner. And so you have to sit down and figure out, what are we both prepared to compromise on? And that's a real tough one, because we work in such different ways. I cannot compromise on agility because I'm hurting the business. I have a suspicion you cannot compromise on risk and control, but I don't want to put words in your mouth.
Yeah, absolutely. But ultimately, procurement wants to buy well. We want to buy good value, but we want to do so safely. And when I say safely, we're not just here to protect the business. We're there to protect you as budget holders, as controllers of that spend. So the argument I would say is we actually have the same interests, because of course, marketing teams tend to be highly commercial, and you don't want to be spending unwisely. But I think sometimes procurement teams can almost equate what they perceive as a lack of planning from marketing teams as, oh, they're just not commercial, they're just chaotic, they just don't know what they're doing, kind of thing.
We just look at the different aspects of being commercial. But oddly enough, you just mentioned something that I hadn't thought about bringing into the conversation today, but it's the negotiation part. Actually, for the buyer, so the marketeer buying, you reach a certain point where you can only negotiate so far. And actually, where I think we miss out is on the opportunity to have you guys coming in and helping us with the last mile of negotiation, right?
Yes.
Because we're in a danger spot where we don't want to ruin the relationship with the supplier, but at the same time, we probably not doing enough to get more value.
Yeah, just on the last mile of negotiation though, and I'm sure there'll be many people in the chat, and I'd love anyone who's on this webinar. I can see so many people have joined. Thank you so much. And we've got, Isabel, we've got a truly global audience. It's incredible. But I feel that sometimes procurement can feel quite frustrated when we're brought in at the last minute, because actually the truth is that most negotiation leverage is lost if we're just brought in to do the fine tuning on a deal that's already been done. So I'm going to throw the challenge back to you, Isabel. How do you bring us in early enough to actually make a demonstrable difference to the negotiation? Or are we negotiating the right things?
Oh gosh, are we negotiating? I think this is where the issue lies. I don't think any marketeer can make a serious promise to procurement that they will stand by, which is we'll bring you in earlier, because we do everything last minute, right? this is the world we inhabit, right? And we
Yeah.
have very little control over it. However, what you've just mentioned is how do we bring more value? It's a real problem. We don't know how to do it. It's not our core strength. And I do say value because often the type of vendors we deal with, you know, they've got fixed costs, right?
Yeah.
Let's just talk for an event, for instance. You know, people who put
Yeah.
events together got fixed costs, right?
Yeah.
Trying to think that they're going to give you a discount on the overall price of your event is, right, it's not going to happen. However, we could work better together with me saying to you, do you know what? Actually, if they could give me this extra value here, right? Another 2 extra meetings or
Yeah.
something else, that contributes actually a lot of value for us,
Yes.
right? It will be monetary on the purchase order, but in terms of real value, it will make a massive difference.
Yeah. The other thing I'd say in terms of the negotiation, perhaps we should think about negotiation from a different perspective. So from a procurement point of view, I've started this whole webinar with the whole point that we have traditional metrics around savings. Well, actually, a marketeer listening to us saying we're going to cut your spend by X% and look how great that's going to be, that's not actually what you want to hear. You want to actually hear that you can maximize your investment and maximize the return on investment. So I'm wondering if there's more alignment in terms of understanding what are the things we should be jointly measuring on and seeing those as our success metrics.
Oh, yes, I am loving this. I am loving this because I think one of the disconnects between our two departments is one of language. We speak the same language. Well, no, we use the same words, but somehow we don't speak the same language. That's the point I
Yes.
was making. So where you want to measure, you know, value through a lower cost, maybe,
Yeah.
you know, I measure value through a higher ROI. And where you talk about cost, I talk about investment. And those two words just on their own, right?
Yes.
They are separated by, it feels like a universe. Because the minute you talk about investment, naturally in our own minds, we think, oh, it's a long-term thing, right?
Yes. Yes.
Because very little investment we all do, whether it's business life or private life, you don't expect a return tomorrow, right? So
Yes.
even just aligning on this, which is aligning on just having an honest conversation saying, Tom, you know, this is the cost of this thing. This is what I'm expecting to get from it, but not until X amount of time.
Yeah. Yeah, but a lot of that comes down to understanding. So how many, and I'm going to throw this out to the procurement teams, people in the chat, how many of you are actually sitting down and having those honest conversations with your CMO, with your marketing teams on a regular basis, on perhaps a quarterly basis? So how many of you are actually asking what are the metrics that matter to the marketing team, and then how do we align those back to procurement metrics? I'm just gonna check. Please shout out in the chat if any of you are doing that, or if any of you want to admit that that might be something that's an opportunity, because I feel, Isabel, that a lot of this comes down to misunderstanding. We actually want the same things. We want to be able to buy well, to be able to buy safely, and actually to be able to buy quickly. So how do we make sure that that happens?
Oh, I'm going to be controversial here.
See,
Get with me.
we said we wouldn't fall out.
No. But it comes from a good place, right? But so I don't have an answer, but I'm going to talk a little bit about the things that I have witnessed and observed, which is it's definitely that first conversation way ahead doesn't happen.
Yeah.
But I've spent vast majority of my career working with very, very large organization. And actually, I couldn't have a conversation with procurement. So my
Really?
conversation, oh, yeah, they were hidden behind tickets. Whoever invented tickets, by the way, whether it's for procurement or HR or IT.
I don't like the sound of that procurement team, but carry on.
But and so the conversation was hidden either behind tickets or behind a distribution email, right? So hey, in order to get the best conversation with us procurement, you know, email this inbox, right? And somebody will come back to you. And And I do think this happens as much in smaller company, but in large company, right? Elephant
Yeah.
in the room happens. And actually, Tom, we can't even get that right, let alone getting the first conversation, that the real adult senior to senior conversation, right?
Mm,
And it's at both levels that it doesn't happen. So
yeah.
certainly I think CMOs should make more of a commitment to go to procurement and just say, let me just share with you as much as I know right now ahead of time.
Yes.
So you're
Yeah.
prepped. And then day to day, there just has to be better channel of communications between those people that do the requests and those who
Yeah.
answer them.
Yeah. It's a kind of level of maturity, really. And I know that sounds strange to say in a business context, but why aren't we having those adult conversations? Why are we hiding behind processes?
I'm stumped. I don't know. Can somebody in the chat tell us, right? And if you know why this is happening, because so listen, I'm gonna advance something, right? From the shoes of how did I feel as a really young marketeer?
Yes.
So as a really young marketeer, I was scared of procurement. And I was scared of procurement because I didn't know what you did, why you did it, and
Yeah.
I didn't the language that you used, right? So
Mm.
for instance, just what can I use as oh, for instance, the first time I got subjected to the word accruals, right?
Oh, yes.
And I was too ashamed to ask what that was, right? But
Yeah.
it's a good example of you're a young marketeer. These people have got the power to say yes or no, right?
Yes.
To what you want to do. And they have power over your success, really, and how you're perceived. But you're intimidated, right?
Mm.
And it's okay to say that on the whole, young marketers are probably intimidated to engage with procurement.
Mm. Yeah, but as you know, there's a big part of this, and this is again a challenge I'm going to throw out to any of the people in procurement who are in the chat. Do procurement speak in a language that truly enables and encourages our business partners to want to work with us? Because a lot of the things that we do sometimes is we hide behind processes or language that kind of almost portrays this technical expertise that actually, to Isabel's point, is intimidating. Why don't we stop and why don't we start thinking about what is the language that is going to enable us to align our understanding with the marketing teams, and how do we do that in a way that means that we work in partnership? Because there's two choices here. We either carry on as we are, and basically marketing is seen as the rogue maverick spenders who are in the business that we can't get a grips with, or we enjoy delivering a partnership approach where we work closely together to deliver strategic partnerships with good suppliers, and we have a good relationship. And the converse of that is that if we do that, then we can start perhaps reporting on different metrics than our traditional metrics, because maybe things like return on investment and speed to market and number of innovations, that type of things, are actually value metrics that we could report as part of the procurement success as well as the marketing success.
Yeah. Oh, that innovation word has just triggered something that I really wanted to get
Oh, not
across.
not a horror story, surely.
No, not a horror story, not a horror story. It was both about language and innovation. So there's a little bit of a story here. Um, I think every time I've also had conversation with procurement professionals, especially within the role that I have at Soldo, where
Yes.
it goes to just my day-to-day role of CMO. I interact with lots of procurement because we work with them, right? For the solutions that we get to market. But one of the difference in language that creates confusion is I often hear procurement talk about tail spend, right?
Yeah.
It's like it really is tail spend, almost all of it, with some exception, but probably in your world it's tail spend.
Yeah.
The other thing is I have noticed is everybody, in fact, you and I think I've had that conversation before. Everybody's got different definition of tail spend,
Yeah.
right? What is tail spend for one company is not necessarily tail spend for another. So
Yes.
immediately introduce sort of confusion. But tail spend in itself doesn't help you define what the problem is.
No.
It just says it's at the tail, right? So
Yeah.
it's at the end of something, so probably not as important as something else.
Yeah, the language is wrong, isn't it?
Exactly. But the minute you switch that to stop using tail spend, but you use the term decentralized spend, immediately you put a different understanding on what it is that people are trying to do. Because in essence, what it is spend where the decision to spend really is very decentralized. It's decentralized to people who own budgets, who own decision making, who choose who the vendor is, what the event might be, what the brand agency might be. But so a lot of the decision making is decentralized. And so the minute you start talking about that language, you start figuring out, oh, actually, so what we're trying to solve is a different problem. And what we should try to look at is, how does procurement continue to have control over decentralized spend where decisions largely happen somewhere else? And once you start answering that question, you get to a good place, I think.
Yeah, I will say tail spend again is one of procurement's big headaches, because reality is tail spend feels like the stuff where the risk might sit, because we don't have good visibility, we don't have foresight, and actually, frankly, and someone's called it out in the chat, how little time we have. We're not resourced as a procurement team, probably as a business, to effectively manage that spend. But again, if we reframe this is actually something that jointly we own responsibility for. Like, procurement and marketing teams will care about the same things ultimately. So it's, how do we view this in a way that actually means that we are assigning value to it, dealing with it efficiently, and almost working together to help solve the headache, if that makes sense?
Yeah, it does make sense, 100%.
Yes. And I think with tail spend as well, I get your point on the terminology, because tail spend is never well defined. So I can work in different businesses, and I have worked in different businesses where it means completely different things. Like, in one business, tail spend is basically travel and expenses and all the little stuff that goes on. In other businesses, it can actually be quite chunky, important bits of spend that just happen to sit beneath the procurement policy radar. And it's, how do you, there's almost segment, I don't want to overcomplicate it, but you almost got to segment within the tail spend in terms of how you deal with it. And maybe there should be much more, maybe I'm probably going to get really chastised in the chat here, but there are some things that I think procurement teams should just let go. There's some things that you think, does it really matter? I feel we can get really hung up by principle sometimes.
Yeah, I'm going to tell you a funny story. I have heard, it's not happened just once, it's been several times. I've heard people talk about tail spend and do a slip of the tongue, as we would say in French. We call that a lapsus révélateur for all my French friends on the chat. Lapsus révélateur is a slip of the tongue that reveals the problem behind. And I've heard many people refer to tail spend as tail spin.
Yes.
Doesn't tell you everything you need to know.
Yes. Yeah.
It's that lack of control, right?
Yes. Yeah. Do you know, typically though, I wonder if there's something in procurement professionals' DNA around the word control, because we feel like we can't relax unless we feel that we've got control over everything. But actually, what can actually sometimes prevent us from truly adding value and being strategic in an organization is because we try to control everything in the same way. We try to layer the same process across every bit of spend. And what ends up happening is we end up kind of frustrating the business, doing nothing particularly well, being over-resourced, stressed, not managing things, and actually missing some of the bigger things. I've been in a situation, Isabel, where I've seen huge due diligence go into the introduction of a freelancer at a relatively low kind of spend. And then at the same time, the board is bringing in a major consultancy to come and do a multi-million-pound transformation program, and there's been no due process around their selection. Now, that might sound extreme. I promise you that has happened. And I'm
Oh,
thinking,
I can
why?
see it.
How do we let that happen?
Yeah, and I can also see it, and this is where I've got to do a mea culpa. The problem is if we're not prepared to compromise on that control or do control differently, which is something I want to
Yes.
get back to at this stage,
Yes.
then what happens is, well, in fact, I've seen it. You either paralyze people. So I can tell you, because I've been there. Sometimes I've made that choice, right? But I've seen it in my teams. Is you just give up because you just think this is never going to get some. Brilliant idea. We could make money from it. I'm not even going to go there. So that's the phrase we'll use, right? And then it's a missed opportunity, which for us go to market people, it's criminal, right?
Yes.
It is criminal. Or, and that might be more criminal, you just get people to break the rules,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
And then this is absolutely when you do get that maverick spend, you do get that person who's used oh my God, I'm going to say something that's going to inflame the chat here. Marketers who use their T&E card to pay for something that they shouldn't. I mean, it's
Yeah.
not that they shouldn't have bought it, it's just they've used the wrong mechanism. So
Yes.
they've used the T&E card to circumvent the process, right? And so they break the rules.
Yeah, so what happens there is, Isabel, is what we've not done as procurement is we've not set the framework or the parameters around the different levels of spend to be able to say, here's the process which enables you to get what you need quickly. I've been in the situation where at a business, they were looking to bring in a ice cream van just for the day to the head office because it was a really hot day. It was one of those 35-degree record-breaking days that they had. And there was this procurement guy who was almost saying, no, we need to set up the PO, we need to do, and it's like, no, you're misunderstanding this. Like, what's important here? This is just a local supplier. It's a good for the staff. And that's where I think sometimes we can get too stuck in the kind of control loop. I just want to call out, by the way, because I don't want to miss it. Guy Lowe in the chat has said of procurement, we should be guide dogs, not guard dogs. I feel like I want to use that at the hook of a LinkedIn post, Guy. Can I? It's absolutely brilliant. So
It's utterly brilliant.
yes,
I think
well done.
Guy probably doesn't know it, but if you bring dogs into the conversation, you've got Isabel's heart forever.
100%. 100%. You have my heart, and you my mind, my everything.
Guy, I've chipped myself into this. I want to, at the risk of getting lynched, I want to interrupt your process flow for a moment. We have a couple of good questions, and also, I mean, you've seen the chat, right? You can monitor as you're speaking. The chat's fabulous, but a couple of good questions, and one, I want to ask you them in turn. So, really good question from Felipe. Procurement's a tool to manage the incoming inputs. Marketing is the creator of the outgoing inputs. Okay. Therefore, should procurement be the budget holder every time? And, should procurement therefore be in conversation with marketing before any creative outgoing ideas on the table? I'm saying no. I think you are too, actually, both of you. But go on, answer that one.
It's not scalable. It's just not scalable. That's my only thing.
Yeah, I mean, just so I'm clear, Rory, was the question, and I'm just looking at now, about should procurement be the budget holder and then marketing come to procurement for that budget? Is that it?
Yeah, but that's the way I'm interpreting
Yeah.
it.
So
Maybe Felipe, if you want to clarify, put some more in the chat or ask another question.
I know Felipe well, and he's a great guy. So Felipe, forgive me, but I'm going to disagree with you here. Well, maybe it's not a disagreement, maybe it's just a question, a provocation, but I do not believe that procurement's role should ever be the budget holder. We're not here to control in that way. We're here to support, and actually, I'm not going to use the word support because support function has dangerous connotations. We're here to enable the business to buy better. And that doesn't mean that we should control and own the spend. That is my firm belief. And actually, what we should be focusing on is how do we deliver good partnership with our functions so that they want to engage us early. That's my
and that's a lovely segue, Tom, into the other question that I wanted to highlight, which is from Louis Roberts. Louis asks, contracts are low down in our marketing team's priorities. Guilty, I think Isabel would also hold her hand up at that on occasion. I believe this will always be the case given their workload. And we've talked in the chat about, everyone being time poor at the moment. How do we become a trusted ally to help in that space and become true partners? I'm assuming the we in this case is procurement. So, Tom, over to you.
So I have to say, I was a little bit distracted by the chat. Can you just give me the essence of the
Of
question?
course.
Or story?
Yeah, the question is look, marketing doesn't care about contracts. Procurement doesn't care about marketing's objectives. Back to the initial conversation. But, Louise taking us along the path that I want to take you both on, which is we really outlined the issue. What's the solution? How does procurement become that trusted ally? How do we create that magic? Because when it works, it's amazing. I think Isabel and I have both seen it once, and it's phenomenal. So that's the
I mean, there's probably not time on this webinar to give all of the practical tips on what I've done, but what I would say is, firstly, in terms of the contracts point of view, we need to define actually what protection we need in place for the spend that is actually being, or the investment, Isabel, that marketing is making. And actually, I think this is where we need to be very careful about trying to create a rigid contract framework that doesn't fit what the marketing team needs. The next thing that I've done well in the past is we've almost worked together collaboratively a year ahead to almost create like a roster of preferred suppliers that procurement and marketing agree have already gone through various stages of kind of due diligence, such that when the marketing teams need to act quickly, there's almost a framework agreement in place already so that we don't have to jump through those hoops. That's a way to get ahead. And the third thing I'd say is to have those conversations on a regular cadence with the marketing teams so that you can start to see what's coming up. By the way, there's probably loads of tips that I could give, but those are my 3 pragmatic ones. Isabel, I'd love to know your view on those.
Yeah. So, by the way, before I do this, there's one comment that's actually made me mentally laugh, which is and I've got to pick up on it before I answer. The guy wrote, "Having a budget is a privilege, not a right." I'm going to say something controversial. Said most marketeers think it's a curse.
And why is that?
So it is because often is a tremendous weight of responsibility on young shoulders, right? So marketeers, even they are junior, get given with very little training, right? Responsibility over budgets that far exceed what they would have in their own personal lives, right? So it comes with a lot of stress. It comes a lot of stress because let me tell you, we get a lot of pressure from everyone over that budget. Everybody wants to spend that budget differently, right? And then the last thing is because we are 100% held responsible for the results that are driven from that investment. And that sometimes, it weighs really, really heavy. I mean, I always say to anybody who comes into marketing, you have to have the skin of a rhinoceros to make it in marketing, right? And which is what I was saying about it being sometimes a curse, right? It is wonderful if you are confident and if you work with others really well. And then, yes, I agree. It is a privilege. I also agree it's not a right. It is genuinely a privilege because you can do some wonderful things, right? But it comes with its own fair weight of stress and responsibility.
Stress, responsibility, pressure, And just just as you're speaking there, I am a big advocate, as anyone knows me, of the soft skills of procurement. So the influencing, and a big part of what I coach with my students is that self-awareness and also empathy. So actually, how many procurement professionals in this chat who are on this webinar right now actually were aware that that's how the marketeers view their budget? And how many of you are actually kind of thinking about the stress and the pressure that the marketing team is under. So that initial assumption that, oh, you know, they're so disorganized, they're so chaotic, they don't care about their spend, all of those things that might go through. Actually, how many of us are aware that actually there's a lot of pressure there? So I think it's about a kind of mindset thing, apart from anything, but are we having enough of those conversations as well? Like, are we actually, I always say, the first half hour of the conversation with your new stakeholder, whoever you're building it with, you should forget you're in procurement. You should actually ask questions like, what's going on in your world right now? What are your big pressures? What are your big pressures for the year? And that way we can develop empathy and then start to build the procurement framework around that.
100%. I do feel I have to go back to the initial question though, which was, you know, what are the pieces of advice that I would give? I think some of them you've already covered and I 100% agree with, which is the more senior you are in that relationship, the more you owe it to your teams and yourselves to just sit down and have those conversations that are not happening. So if nothing else, like I said, explain what the plan is, what the pressure is, what you're trying to drive, and do it well ahead, right? I do think also, and this is like, guys, shameless plug, right? But you have to use what is fit for purpose. Tom, you said it yourself a few minutes ago. We are trying to push to a function, processes and technology that were designed for something else, right? I never get this right in English, you know, a square peg, round hole, right?
Yeah, you've got it right. You've done it.
But it's, you know, I feel sometimes that for a lot of what we invest in, that just doesn't work. There are, of course, a few big contracts negotiation for which, you know, 100%, we do the RFP, we work with you, and that works great. But the vast majority doesn't fit that model, and the vast majority requires a different speed. So I think genuinely it is time for us to have a conversation around, is it the right process? Is it the right tools? Right? Because you know, I know this day to day because I know this. Soldo is the only company I've ever worked at where I don't have this problem. And I don't have this problem because we have a different solution. And it is a solution where we give procurement and finance all the control they need, the workflows, the approvals, and everything else, right? But in a solution delivery that avoids the endless going backwards and forwards and you know, endless discussions. It happens in real time, but you don't lose any control. Now it does mean accepting that actually budget that marketing holds is slightly different to the budget that most other functions hold, right?
You're under different time frames, you're under different pressures, and you're measured by different things.
Exactly. That mean we don't want you to have control, because actually, like I was saying, you know, sometimes it's good to have somebody who does that extra bunch of approvals and signatures, so we feel like, oh, okay, my back is covered, right?
Yes.
It's important to us.
Just one thing, because I talked about empathy, and perhaps we've both got a common challenge here in the room, which we're not talking about, and that is the pressure from the CFO. So very often, certainly in traditional procurement teams, the procurement team reports into the CFO, and the CFO will tend to look to the procurement team to deliver in the year savings. So that is the key pressure point. At the same time, the CFO is looking at the big budget and the big investment that marketing has spent and thought, oh, there's an opportunity there because they don't understand marketing. Is there an opportunity for procurement to actually bridge that gap and to start communicating with the CFO more around the different metrics that we should be measuring marketing spend on?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I can't wait to see what everybody else comes up, because I think the people in the chat will have even stronger opinions. To me, it makes sense, right?
Yeah.
It 100% makes sense, because that conversation with the CFO, again, with the CMO, is not always easy, right? It's a tough conversation.
Rory, I know you're going to come in here, but another brilliant comment in the chat, which I think has just emphasised what you've just said, Isabel. Edwin has said, marketing budgets are easy to cut by senior management, but if procurement can see the value, perhaps we can be marketing's friends. My goodness, I thought we were going to disagree on today's. Rory, can you ask a question that means that me and
I'm
Isabel
gonna
will
throw something in because there's a great question in the chat, which I'm gonna share out now. But we got 40 minutes in before the dreaded phrase came in, and here we go. How would you, in procurement, use AI to make you a superhuman? Or what is the most painful thing that you want AI to alleviate? So I'm going to throw that one at you, Tom,
Oh
because
my
we're using
goodness.
it heavily in marketing.
Hang on a minute. This was not supposed to be an AI in procurement webinar.
It isn't, no, but it's been asked. So, or we can just pretend it doesn't exist.
No. I mean, I get the question, and I do just want to say, just relating it to this chat, these are actually the types of conversations we should be having with our marketing teams around actually AI. I see as a massive productivity hack if used well and if used safely. And actually, when it comes to perhaps understanding some of our spend and maybe understanding some of the tail spend and helping us digest that data in a better way, there are so many procurement tech companies, businesses that help us to do that. So maybe the answer is actually in automation and some of the things that we can do better to manage the spend. So, but Isabel, I know it wasn't a question to procurement, but I'm wondering if that resonates with you.
It does. I think there's certainly ways in which we could bring AI to alleviate certain pains that are very acute to us in marketing. I think somebody mentioned it in the chat, and then there was so many other comments. I lost it in the chat. But budget management, right?
Yes.
And there are different school of thoughts. You know, I've worked with plenty of companies where they'll just say, "Tough marketing. It's your job to budget manage." Fair, right?
Yeah.
And then there are other companies who will just say, no. We
Yeah.
control what's reported in the budget. We'll tell you what your budget is. We'll tell you how much you've spent.
Yeah.
And invariably, there is a ton of friction right there. And it comes again from something, Tom, you've said again and again, we work at different speeds, right?
Yes.
I consider spend something that is committed in my mind to an activity I've already told the business we were going to do, right? You, however, report spend differently, which is as there really been a PO, right? Did we
Yeah.
get the invoice matching the PO, yada, 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 yada.
Yeah.
If we could get some AI, almost intelligent agent to help us with the budget management, I think it could lift an awful lot of painful discussions.
Yeah.
As to the place it really plays in the act of procurement and how we work together, I don't know. Maybe I need to be enlightened by other people, right?
Yeah.
I haven't yet found something that has been compelling enough. Not saying it's not coming.
No. And I will just say, Rory, because it is probably one for a whole different webinar on AI and procurement, but I will just say, truthfully, I think a lot of businesses are still working it out, even though they're not admitting it. And in procurement, I do think it's a huge opportunity. But someone put in the chat, I think it was Edwin again, who's on fire today, AI is almost intelligent. And I would say that's the best way to view it, because ultimately, yes, it can help us, but we shouldn't be relying on it to solve all our problems. The biggest thing we need to be doing as procurement professionals is focusing on how do we build better relationships with our business stakeholders. And that's why I'm really emphasizing the importance of that in the chat today.
And I love the fact that, you know, every single piece always comes back to let's communicate better, because that's the fundamental basis of this. Right. I'm going to give you 30 seconds each because we've really run flying through our time. I'm going to start with you, Tom. And you kind of hinted at this in a previous answer, but for the procurement leaders and the business unit heads watching today, what are the first practical steps they can take to bring this speed and control closer together?
First steps, actually book time with your stakeholders. I mean proper time. I know that I've seen earlier on in the chat people saying, oh no, we're too busy, we haven't got time, and X, Y, and Z. But actually, These are really important fundamental conversations to have. Otherwise, we're on a treadmill. We're not going to make any difference. We're going to face the same friction year after year and things don't improve. And the second thing I would say is work out actually what is your true success metrics. So actually, it could be that traditional metrics that you have with other departments and teams doesn't apply to marketing. That's okay. Work collaboratively with your marketing teams to make sure that you've got an agreed allied KPIs that actually work for the stakeholder and that you can report them confidently back to the CFO. Sorry, that was more than 30 seconds.
That's okay. It was high value. We'll let you off, Tom. Isabel.
Well, kind of at the risk of like sounding like we're too pally-pally, I do agree with everything that Tom said, right? So there's literally nothing I would disagree. The thing, as well as communications, I think the acceptance of the fact that we do something different that requires different support. Once people have understood this, I think half of the problem is sorted. And then it's easy to have a conversation, as I was, alluding to earlier, to just say, well, if this is more about decentralized decision making than anything else, then what other tools and processes can be put in place to give you the degree of control you need, but give ability back?
Right.
And if you can get that done, oh boy, it's heaven.
Guys, I'm really sorry to pull this together, but we've overstayed our time. But thank you to everybody who joined today. It's been a fabulous discussion. Clearly, a lot more to discuss as we go. The recording of this webinar will be made available. You'll be able to download it or review it in I think in a couple of days. We'll have it uploaded and ready to go. But let me say thank you to everyone for joining. Big thank you to Tom and Isabel for being good sports and bringing a lot of experience to this and being collaborative at the end of the webinar. So everybody have a great rest of day, morning, afternoon, wherever you are. And thank you again for joining. Cheerio.
Thanks. Bye-bye, everyone.
Thank you.